understand exactly when we speak of Donald Trump and when we speak of the high tariffs and one of the steepest tariff hike that has now been imposed on India, how the situation is now developing economically. Is the power axing down changing, especially when it comes to the Prime Minister's presence and the troika in Tianjin that was witnessed, especially when it comes to the coming together of presidents of China and of Russia, who were seen holding this warm handshake with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, seems to be sending jitters to the West, in particular the United States of America. Let's play out this conversation with Edward Price, political economist and former head of economic policy in the British Consulate General, New York.
Joining me tonight on the News Hour is Edward Price, a political economist who looks at and studies Trump very closely. Well, the whole world is doing that right now. But thank you very much for joining me, Mr. Price. And I want to begin by asking you, how do you look at the Trumpisms with respect to India in recent times? I want to ask you these questions on the global stage. The way Trump has slapped tariffs on India, the literally breaking point, the relationship between US and India is at the moment, and of course the recent bonhomie with President Putin, Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi. What do you see from all of this in geopolitics today?
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here. George Washington, the first American president, warned Americans against permanent alliances in the world. He did not warn Americans against having any friends anywhere. And it seems to me, in answer to your question, that President Donald Trump has taken that advice, turned it on its head, and decided that the best thing for American foreign policy is that other countries form permanent alliances arrayed against the United States. That's very strange, and we saw President Trump just today complaining on his Truth Social platform, the Twitter ripoff, that he was afraid that the Chinese, North Koreans and Russians were conspiring against the United States. That might be the case, but I think there's still time to the point for India not to conspire against the United States. I don't think that's how India behaves anyway. It's not how it conducts itself. And so my hope is that if the Indians give us about 400 days until the midterms, we might be able to turn this problem around. Meanwhile, however, I do understand that the United States has insulted India, and we'll have to discuss that.
Well, I want to ask you, you've said that Trump had very little understanding of economics, according to you, but then you amended it to say that he has no understanding of economics and statecraft. Why do you say this, and what else does he have no understanding of? Because he seems quite clueless about most things, if I may just say it very politely.
Sure. Well, look, I'll offer you a frank response to that. As an analyst, I try to take things seriously. I try to be balanced. And like many analysts, I've spent several years trying for the best of me to see what's good in President Donald Trump. So let's be fair, let's be balanced. I think he has an extraordinary political skill. He communicates very well. And to be fair to the man, he sees problems. He has an imagination and he thinks about things in different ways. My trouble is the execution. The execution is chaotic and destructive. And so when I said the other day on the record that, yes, I've now concluded that he does not understand economics at all, that is the product of about a decade of thinking about this guy, my patience has run out, and my objective analysis is that the only way to describe what he's doing with India is either that he is too silly to understand what the impact is, or he's doing it on purpose. And again, that for me, when you think about the United States president doing things on purpose against the US national interest, that's when I start to glitch out, because it's very strange.
Are you sure you're saying what you're saying, that he's acting against American interests, not just India's interests?
Well, yes, I mean, let me put it like this to you. In the great power game, which is ongoing, and may it continue for many hundreds of years, because the only way it ends is very badly with nuclear exchange. In that great power game, there is some case for the United States changing its policy versus China. There is an imbalance in the global economy. The United States has been exporting fiat currency and security services to the world, and the Chinese, as is their sovereign right, are not interested in that model, and they're trying something else out. So there's your great power competition. But there is no reason whatsoever for the United States to insult India at this point, and I would argue every reason that the Indians are actually favored. Because if you do want to play that game with China, you certainly cannot turn around and put a 50% tariff on Indian democracy. It doesn't make sense unless, of course, the President of the United States is trying to damage United States national interests. Again, very strange thought.
Well, I want to ask you, is there any logic in the fact that he's imposed tariffs on India about 50%, saying that India is probably financing the Ukraine war, but he hasn't done the same to America itself, which buys Russian oil, China, which buys much more than India does, or is logic too much to ask for?
Logic is never too much to ask for. We should all be aspiring towards logic every day. But this is a complicated issue. On the one hand, yes, any support for Ukraine I welcome, and I think a lot of Westerners welcome, and I think a lot of Europeans welcome, because we see it very simply. We see it as a form of Russian aggression designed to attack democracy. By the way, India is a democracy, so I would hope deep down the Indians, with their very bad experience of British imperialism, would also see it that way, and I'm sure many do. But on the other hand, of course, the global economy is globalized. The clue's in the title. So it's very different. It's very difficult for the United States to simply turn around and say to China, for example, well, look, we're going to sanction your financial system. That would ultimately damage the dollar standard, which is one extremely important part of US global reach and global power. So again, Trump is not coherent. I don't think that the way to persuade India or ask India to get on what we think of as the right side of the Ukraine-Russia war, the way to do that is not to have people like Pete Navarro insulting India, and the way to do that is not to have a 50% tariff. I said on another show recently that a more appropriate thing would be zero. Maybe that's hyperbolic, but it's better than 50.
But do you think the way right now America is behaving with India, will India be ever able to trust the strategic ties between the two countries, number one, and number two, you said Trump must apologize to India. Do you think his ego would ever allow him to do that?
The day that Donald Trump apologizes for anything, I'll come back on your show and eat my hat, which is an old English expression. He won't apologize, no. What I meant by that was that maybe George Washington was wrong. Maybe in the 21st century, the United States does need permanent alliances, does need people on its side if it does want to compete. We have Japan, I think. We have the EU and the UK. For the life of me, I don't understand why we're not full court going after India. We should have Modi on the red carpet out here in Alaska, not Putin. And this is something that, for someone who's, like me, I can see you've read a lot of history, I've read a lot of history. It makes no sense, because it's what the Americans call a no-brainer. If you want to compete with China, you have to get India on side, period.
But has Trump managed to do the exact opposite, pushed India closer to Russia and China? Would you read anything into the body language of the meetings that were held in Tianjin just 48 hours ago?
Well, I'm not a body language expert. I mean, there are people that do that stuff, people that do lip reading. It looks friendly, but you never know if this stuff is theater, right? You never know if their aides have been texting each other for weeks on the exact form that the hug will take, or not, if it's spontaneous. Putin has good reason to be happy with North Korea, because North Korea is sending troops to Europe. And of course, President Xi Jinping has good reason to be happy with both Putin and Un, because they are effectively his allies, if not his vassals. But in terms of body language, I mean, look, Trump slapped Putin on the hand. Putin cuddled with his counterparts. It's a lot of theater, I think.
India, where does India stand on this? How do you think Prime Minister Modi is handling the situation?
Well, Prime Minister Modi, I think, is being smart right now, because he did go and talk to Putin and Xi, and that was a message to the United States. But then he didn't go to the military parade, which was a message to China and Russia. And my interpretation of that is that India and Modi are reminding all of the other great powers, look, we're up and coming, we're clipping at your heels, we're going to be the third largest economy in the world, and we're going to be a superpower effectively, just give us a bit of time, and don't forget that we go our own way. So I don't think that, Modi's not a perfect leader, nobody is, but I think of all of them, he's played this with the most agility, and he's played this in a way that reminds both the US and China and Russia that India will make its own policy in its own time.
So tell me, how does this play out back home for Trump? The manner in which he's gone after India, and there are all kind of stories. I'm getting off the formal stuff. I'm getting on to the social media stuff. Epstein files. It's about his health scares or his health details, about how his private enterprise is benefiting from his public office. How is it playing out back home for President Trump?
Well, maybe the interesting thing for your audience is the following suggestion, that there is actually a difference between Trump and Trumpism on the one hand, and MAGA and those people who have traditionally voted for him on the other. And this is something that you really sort of have to squint your eyes slightly to see, because they very often move in lockstep together, Trump and his base, his so-called base. Actually, they're starting to split. And there are elements of the MAGA movement which are really Marxist. They're about the working class, which in America refers to itself as the middle class, but they're about the working class howling in pain because of NAFTA, because of the introduction of Chinese wage competition, and so on. And then Trumpism, it stands in contrast to that because it is effectively autocratic, elite, and corrupt. And so as this base, as this effectively working class movement, it wouldn't describe itself as that, but as this working class movement slowly figures out that actually maybe Trump isn't exactly who he's pretended to be, there's going to be hell to pay. And that will go in one of two directions. Either the MAGA movement will go further to the right and we'll see some form of American nationalism or some enhanced nationalism, we're already seeing it, or we're going to see a swing to the Democratic Party and basically a socialist blue wave in the midterms. So just for your audience, Trump and MAGA, not the same thing.
So then let me ask you, what is his connection, crypto connection with Pakistan? And is it anything to do with America's shifting focus and friendship with Pakistan? Or is it just a family business deal?
Well, like I've said before, that if I had the eyes and ears of God, I would be able to get to the bottom of President Donald Trump's financial interests. I don't, so it would be unwise to speculate. I mean, these things are, by their nature, obscure, right? Cryptocurrency, again, the clue's in the title, crypto. It's pretty much secret. But yes, the United States and India, you're right to mention Pakistan, because Pakistan and India, obviously, I don't need to tell you on your show, have long-standing less than diplomatic relations sometimes, and military conflict very recently. And so the United States, in its war on terror, I think mishandled that entire relationship with India, and of course had a beef with Pakistan at some point. So it's a whole moving bag of financial interests, great power politics, India-Pakistan relationships. And I don't think that President Trump has a coherent enough foreign policy to deal with any of that, in part probably because he's more likely to be scoping out golf courses than he is thinking about world peace.
So let me ask you, is America moving up on the scale of winning friends and winning people across the world, or is it entering an era of isolationism simply because people really don't know what they need to expect every morning when they wake up?
Well, American isolationism has a long and storied history, and there have been periods of American isolationism. We mentioned George Washington at the start of this interview. We should also probably mention the 1930s, another period in which America effectively withdrew from the world. But I'm not sure that isolationism is the right word to describe Trump's foreign policy, because he is out there in the world making moves, and influencing people. There's a famous book, right, How to Make Friends and Influence People. When Donald Trump is out of office, he might want to write another book called How to Lose Friends and Alienate People, because this is effectively what he's doing. I wouldn't suggest that the United States is going through an isolationist period. I would suggest that the United States is reconsidering its economic policy and trying to shift towards a more autarkic economic policy. That means free from trade. It's probably not going to work, but that's what we're trying to do. And if that is not a war footing, it's certainly a footing that's more capable of war. And of course, war is not isolation.
Well, you put it so well. You might just have been, a literature professor, the way you have your way with words. But in the end, let me then put out another poser for you. How would you describe Trump, the present situation of America vis-a-vis the rest of the world?
Donald Trump is a temporary phenomenon. But he represents permanent parts of the American psyche. I sometimes think of him as the American id. I'm frankly sick of his name escaping my lips, as it does every day, several times, and I'm sure you are. But he's a temporary phenomenon. The real question to ask for your audience, I would suggest, is what comes next? And to that end, I would start talking about people like J.D. Vance. I would start talking about other people in the administration, younger people, who, in contrast to Trump, who is very often mercurial, very often someone that doesn't really seem to have a North Star, morally or otherwise, people like J.D. Vance do have more in the way of an ideology. They do have something more of a coherent vision for an American, if not ethno-state, then some sort of Christian empire, right? I mean, these are crazy phrases to use on your show, but that does seem to be the flavor. And so Donald Trump will go, but as I said before, MAGA will remain. The two-party system in this country has shifted. It's gone back to a much more Jacksonian, old-school Democrat populism. People are upset. People are unhappy. And the thing to watch is whether or not the Democrats can get off their high horse, get off their pedestals, and start talking to the American people in plain language. I really am worried about that. I don't hold out too much hope because the Congress is very, very quiet, very sullen. And if you ask yourself, well, why is the U.S. Congress quiet? I think the answer is twofold. One, the Democrats know that if they speak out, they might get in trouble. And the Republicans know that if they speak out, they certainly will. And that is a very sorry state of affairs, I'm afraid to say.
Okay, before I let you go, what do you think about India and Prime Minister Modi?
Well, look, India has played this pretty well. And by this, I mean the current geopolitical moment. Our restate, Prime Minister Modi, has gone somewhere closer to Russia, somewhere closer to China. It's a shame for my money that the Indians haven't put more pressure on Russia, but look, that's their sovereign policy, that's their decision. And if the United States really wanted Modi and the Indians to move away from Russia, we went about it the exact wrong way. A 50% tariff is an insult. It's bad economics, it's bad diplomacy, it makes no sense. But at the very least, my final thought would be that there's a ray of hope because Modi did not go to the military parade. I don't think that's India's vibe. I don't think that's his vibe. And I think that that is a little door crack, right, with a little bit of light coming through it for the United States and the other democracies. And he's saying, look, you know you messed up, but if you pick up the phone, maybe we can talk.
Well, but he did say he made 4 calls. There was no reply on the other side, if we have to believe some reports. Do you believe those reports?
Well, I always take any report with a healthy dose of skepticism, just as I do any analyst, just as I do what I think myself. I mean, I may change my views next week. But hopefully the India-US relationship can be repaired and can be repaired quickly.
Well, we're looking for the mechanics to do that, repair it fast before it's totally broken. But thank you very much, Professor Price, for joining me. A week is a long time in geopolitics these days because, well, Trump can change his mind more ways than one in single day, in single 24-hour span. So who knows? Maybe we'll catch up again next week to see if our views have changed, if the world has changed. Thank you very much, Professor Price.
Thank you for your time.